G'day and welcome back, Epics. It's Adam, the host of the Mostly Epic Fantasy podcast. An old mate of mine from primary school was a complete loose unit. He was intelligent, chaotic, and savage. He was often in trouble because he wasn't shy when it came to face punching. In his defense, however, he was usually defending himself when the face punching began. Although his mouthy nature meant that defending himself was a position he found himself in more often than not. His name was Chris, and he was, at the time, a young and troubled bloke that had a feather's touch of a virtuous soul. His convoluted morality or justifications seemed to be quite charismatic. It was a balance between pointing at the lies of others and then backing it up with a fistful of pain. He was courageous. I was a peacemaker and a class clown that would joke about anything and anyone. The truth in me was hidden behind jokes and wordplay. I would often find myself in situations which required me to either fight or to talk my way out of it. Talking my way out of it generally meant more jokes and more laughter as the seriousness of the situation grew. However, sometimes words would stop. As much as I tried to keep the peace, the fight would take over, and when that happened, Chris had my back. I was his mate, and he was as loyal as a bulldog. I was also one of the only people who could have a crack at Chris and get away with it. He would punch and cork me in the arm, which sucked, but I could do the same to him without fear of it escalating. Looking back, there was something about that time. It was pure chaos. It was fun and it was scary and exciting to be around this unit of a kid. One of the many things that I took away from this time is a stronger backbone. I still had a people-pleasing aspect to me, but it gave me permission to not care and to fight back for its own sake. Ultimately, however, his want for control of the unknown through beating people up got him expelled from school. After he found out he wanted to stay, he wanted so many more second chances to change. But he couldn't change the fight that was in him. It was so part of his being that changing would mean that he would need to be vulnerable, which wouldn't have happened. Chris was wrapped up in the injustice of it all. I mean, he was just defending himself, and he was, but still, the face punching was too much for the school. Too many kids cried. The conversation I had with him after he found out he got expelled was pretty bittersweet. He wanted to remain and be friends. To me, it felt like I was his first real friend. But he was moving again, and it was an hour and a half away to travel to his new house. It wouldn't work. I remember promising that I would try, but I didn't mean it. Looking back at this, I think we both knew it wouldn't work, but we still wanted it to. I was getting swept away in my own shock and grief while trying to help him through his pain. It was so upsetting and hard to do. This was the building blocks of my dislike for school. It didn't cater for broken boys. On reflection, it was sad. I'd lost a mate, a protector, and someone who saw life how I saw it at the time. I think it also dawned on me. I now had to defend myself, and I was alone. So let's change course here for a second and dive into something else. Anne Rice's initial trilogy of vampire novels was my gateway into the captivating, dark, and sort of central realm of these creatures. Her vivid storytelling and rich character development in these books captivated my imagination, drawing me deep into the vampiric lore. At the time, for me, it wasn't my usual choice to read something like Interview with the Vampire. I was a normal type of young bloke with a girlfriend who was brought up in the harsh life of a rough neighbourhoods. Even reading was a bit of a stretch for my predestined archetype. Anne Rice's books developed different types of themes such as complex kinships, pleasure from violence, folklore-level narcissism, and an almost need to see everything through the lens of sensuality. Maybe another way to put it is it's a self-pleasure orientated bunch of books. I guess to wrap this up in a blood-coloured bow, it was weird, dark, mysterious, religious, and interesting enough to keep me reading. It opened my mind to the fact that I could enjoy a vampire book that detailed a way of life that had never really crossed my path. Like, what is this sensual stuff? And what is this being in the moment for its own sake? It was weird. These books definitely left a mark on me, and I loved them. From this point onwards, I was open to reading vampire books. Now, you're all thinking this is an episode for Anne Rice's books, and it isn't. Empire of the Vampire by J. Christoph is a roller coaster of action that's on par with Matthew Riley. The non-stop pull between ultra-violence, fear, sex, law and self-centeredness is unholy and utterly engaging. The author has this deep, wanton, insatiable hunger. It wants to devour your hopes and crush your spirit with its unrelenting inhumanity. The beginning of this book sidesteps your sense of a peaceful beginning, and it rattles your morality about what is good and right in the world. It sets the tone that you're about to go through life's depravities, whether you like it or not. With an intro like that, you may ask why I kept reading. It's a good question. The pull of it, I guess, is the promise of a deep religious law, nuanced good and evil, and breakneck action. There's also a journey to atone for sins and a rich world. There's a breadth and depth that you can bury yourself in, so to speak. The main character, Gabriel DeLoyne, don't know if I'm saying that right, but I'm going to continue with it, is severely broken. He's intelligent, chaotic, and savage. Like Chris, he chose the path of violence to solve his problems. They were both expelled for different reasons, but the parallels around injustice strikes true for me. As I read this book, I would often shake my head and my eyes would defocus as I went back to those memories. Both couldn't be vulnerable because the world around them would have eaten them alive. It's a shared, tragic story of doing things they shouldn't have. The world of Empire the Vampire is intricately detailed, with timelines running back and forth throughout the book. The sub-characters have backstories and motives that you can connect with. They fit and they're compelling. The main religion has ties back to Christianity, but is bent to the purpose of the book, and yet still remains interesting. The tragedy of corruption is so built into the structure of the world, it leaves you with disgust at the depravities of it all. It's hard to be vulnerable and read this book. It really does strike you to the core. Love and loss push and pull you between the characters as your hopes rise, and then they are dashed. Gabriel's relationship has both love and loss. It is so broken and hopeless that your brain becomes twisted trying to hope for him while simultaneously feeling the bittersweet loss of his situation. His broken spirit is justified, and you're brought along the painful journey. Gabriel is an ass and annoying, but you feel for him. You do hope it works out. At this point, I feel like I've been overly visual and emotive, so for my own sanity, I'm going to try and switch up the rest of this episode. The degenerates, or let's just call them vampires, are broken up into different branches and have their own special abilities. This is on top of being generally stronger and faster than your normal humans, which are used like pigs in this book. The tropes of other vampire books are also relevant here. Sunshine hurts, vampires, they're narcissistic in nature, blood this and blood that. Different societies and folklore have sprung up around vampires, and it's all so interesting. A meme comes to mind, and I love it. It's a person in an army-style mask that is used for gas leaks and bombs, and he's riding through a demolished countryside on a car with guns pointing outward. The caption is, "Hey friend, listen, I know the world is scary right now, but..." Then the bottom half of the meme is a close-up of the mask, and it then follows on, "It's going to get way worse." This meme represents this book, and I love it. I also imagine that talking to a vampire would be similar to talking to one of those blokes who seem good, but you always leave thinking bad about yourself and feel like you've done something wrong when you haven't. It's weird. It's that kind of narcissistic nature that comes out of them. There are some points along the way where I felt disjointed in the story, like stuff was either moved around and it didn't flow, or that the author was trying to jam in more high-impact writing to keep the reader going. Like the author felt a particular part was going to lose the reader and he needed to ramp it up. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and it wasn't a deal breaker, but it did throw me out of the story a couple of times. So to close this out, I have often wondered what Chris's life was like after we departed, and looking into this world and how Gabriel's worldview turns out gives me pause. This worldview doesn't end in a happy place. It's a consistent reinforcement of protection, and vulnerability is non-existent. Look, I know this is a stretch as they're completely different worlds, but if I match up the personalities, then all I can say is I'm worried about my old mate and hope that he has found a bit of peace and happiness in this world. I stuck with being a peacemaker. I've always had a way with high-stress situations and being able to talk my way out. I understand fighting is often a release of energy for some and offers a quick closure, but I've always preferred people's hands giving me a high five to an outstretched hand instead of a high five to my face. This book was not only fantastic and engaging, but it reminded me of an old mate along the way. Thank you. If you wish me to continue to make these for you, please sign up to my Patreon page, patreon.com/mostly epic fantasy. It's a small fee of around about $5, which I'll use to buy more books and pay for equipment and fees. You can also trial it for 7 days to see if it's for you. I can also be found on Facebook, which is facebook.com/mostly epic fantasy, and most other social sites, but I'm most active on Facebook. Thank you.